Thanks for tuning in to Stock Car Facts, where all we do is talk stock cars, those vehicles with fenders. And it's been a while since we've actually had a guest on that we've interviewed. We've done a lot of production, and going to get back to a little bit of that question and answer thing. And this young man, it's been a minute since we've talked to him, and we really enjoy talking to these individuals that were there when it actually was fenders and, chassis and things you could understand. And Cliff Champion is a legendary figure in the world of motorsports and NASCAR. And shockingly, it's been 2000 since he's been a crew member at a NASCAR race. But we were overjoyed when he wanted to come on the show. And this is part 1 of 4. So please sit back and enjoy Cliff Champion's walk through his history in NASCAR and his start in Dune Buggies. Edit anything out, so if I go somewhere, just say, well, and then I can edit that out.
Ain't much I know of with
it. But we today have an individual I have never met, but I've heard the name literally 1,000 times. And you've seen him on a lot of other shows on YouTube and other different platforms. And today we have Cliff Champion on the show. And for those of you younger fans that don't know, Cliff was a winning crew chief in the Cup Series from the late 70s until, when were you for your last race?
2000.
2000. I didn't think it was that long ago.
Yeah.
And I looked up your stats, and I was surprised to see that as a listed crew chief, you have 1 win. I thought he's got to have at least a dozen or 2 as the official crew chief, but 1.
Yep.
Wow. How did that happen? Were you just like the supporting cast? Or?
Yeah, pretty much.
Wow.
I took some jobs, and one of them they said, yeah, you can be the crew chief, but this guy, he's the big people person, so we're going to list him as the crew chief. Well, I don't care. Just let me do the job. I don't care what you call me.
And pay me.
Yeah, that's it. So.
And looking back at your interviews and, the different shows you've been on, you had said you weren't really a race fan? Now, did I hear that right?
Yeah. I mean, growing up, I got into drag racing and stuff. And, I had an old V8 Vega that I built, with the fiberglass hood, and all the, big tunnel ram 2.4s and all the stuff, for just a street car. Yeah, just did that. And I had gone to Richmond one time with a friend of mine, and my sister's boyfriend, older boyfriend, right there. And we sat in the stands and watched. It was freezing cold that day, up there. And we sat around, and I was like, man, this ain't for me. It was just freeze up there in the stands that day. And I didn't know what was going on. I think we got my cousin Bill to come over to the fence and say hi one time, and that was it, and that was about the extent of my racing or any kind of circle track racing before that.
But you had to have your hands on it, I'm sure. Just sitting there watching, it's like, I agree. Sitting in the stands, forget it. But if you're inside doing something, being a part of it, I assume that was where your talents lie.
And that's what I did with drag racing. My sister's boyfriend, he had a 64 Chevelle with a 350 horse 327. And, they put what they call the pink stripe cam in it. They did all the stuff to them back then, and the Chevrolets. And we would go to the drag strip with it, and they would race on the street. I'd go with them and help him work on the car and stuff like that. And I was, like 13 years old or something. I'm doing that.
Racing on the street.
And
who didn't do it?
I think about 14. Well, we went to the drag strip, and I'd been working on the cars. He says, well, you want to drive one time? I said, sure. So I pulled up there, and I pull up on the line with this thing, and we got the slicks on it, open headers, and all the stuff right there. And all of a sudden, I didn't know it at the time. He told me, I pull up to the line, and the guy in the starting line right there with the track, he looks over and he sees him standing there. He looks back at the car, and he looks at him, and he goes, he can't do that. By the time the light turned, I dropped the clutch and went. I probably ran about 110 mile an hour, something like that.
Goodness.
In
14
that thing,
years old,
in the quarter mile. And he said, well, I guess you can. So they didn't say nothing else about it,
He can do it.
But I did all that. And then one night we were hanging out at the local, there's a drive-in there, our Shoney's drive-in, and on the back row is where all of the street cars, all the race cars would park. guys that want to street race, all the hopped up race cars back there, and you walk up down through there, right down through there, and yeah, you race out there and stuff. So he's like, right down the street, he said, I know a guy that's got a race car down here at the dealership right down the street. He said, let's go down there. It's okay. So we pull in, and the guy's got an injected funny car. And the dealership, it's got a big block Chevy in it, which you could build if all stock Chevrolet parts. You could use marine parts, marine block, which was 5/8 of an inch taller.
Almost
the deck
like
was
open rules.
And you could run they had a big stroker crank and everything, all marine parts and everything. And you could build a 514 out of a stock over-the-counter parts back then.
That's big.
And he was waiting on the block to get back from the machine shop, and he had to run at the local track. They were having a big show at the local track the next day. And so we hung around, helped him wash parts and stuff like that, and get it ready. When the short block showed up, he put the heads on it and stuff, and we set it, helped him set it in the car, because it was just him there by himself.
Yeah.
So we stayed and helped him do that, and then we put the injectors on it for him, and got the push rods in it, got the valves all set up there and stuff, and then we woke him up, and he went ahead and adjusted the valves and everything, and we loaded it on the truck, and I ran home to change clothes, and I'm just barely, I'm like 15 and 8 months, just got my driver's license right there, and I walk in the house, and it's like 7:30 in the morning, and my dad goes, so by the time you came home, and everything, I said, well, I got to get in the shower, I got to go. He says, well, where do you think you're going? I said, well, I'm going to the drag strip. He said, I think you need to go in there and go to bed. I said, well, look, I said, I ain't worked all night long. I ain't worked all night long to watch somebody else go to the racetrack. I said,
right.
I'm in the shower and I'm out of here.
I paid my dues.
Yeah. And so I went, and I traveled with them for a while. On the weekends they would, I'd help them at night, and then go on the weekends. They had a guy, Tom Smoker Smith, ran
Tom Smoker.
He ran
I haven't heard that name forever.
He ran a fuel injected car. They weren't blown cars; they were injected funny cars, and ran up and down the East Coast. We ran at Shuffletown and Englishtown. Ran all these tracks up and down here.
Englishtown, New Jersey. Wow.
Yeah, we went up to there, and
15 years old.
We actually raced at Charlotte when they had they ran the 8th mile down pit road. We ran there one time.
Yes. Wow.
Yeah, ran all kinds of racetracks around here. So I got to see a lot of stuff, like the old shut down track of Shuffletown over there. That was probably about 68, I'm guessing, somewhere along in there.
Are you familiar with the history of the band Journey?
Neil
Sean, the guitarist?
Yeah.
He started traveling at 15.
Really?
So you're the Neil Sean of racing.
Yeah. So that was about it.
So why don't you gravitate to drag racing? Is it just funny turns in life?
Just got into it, It was the local.
I mean, you didn't keep going.
Local guys. Well, I didn't do it because, I didn't have money. Yeah, I was just a kid.
Right.
But I liked working on things, and the drag racing was there. There wasn't really any circle track racing around there. That I could get involved with. All people I knew were just doing street racing and that guy with the funny car. So I did that, and then and I guess it was about 68, 69 maybe. My brother, he was good friends with a guy down the street that worked at a dealership, and they had a friend that was in drag racing. Guy Rick Holiday was a lawyer up there in Virginia, and he had him. They were running super stock cars back then.
Mm-hmm.
Ronnie Sox and all those guys. They ran that. So my brother was traveling with them on the weekends, doing that. And then they met a guy, Ed Miller, which was his I can't remember if it was 67 or 68 super stock champion. It was the year before they changed into pro stock.
Okay.
And he came into town visiting, and I had built a Dune buggy back then. Ricky Rudd's brother and I had Dune buggies.
Jr.,
He had
right?
Al Jr. He had one. My dad took me by, and we looked at it. So my dad bought me one, or I built it. I was working at a place after school.
Dune in Virginia? Would you go to the Outer Banks, or is there?
Well,
dunes
we
there,
both
or?
lived right there in Virginia Beach.
But are there dunes to?
Oh,
run the
yeah.
dunes?
See, back then you could go from Virginia. You could drive right down the coast, and it was only about maybe 5 or 6 miles, about 6 miles of beach before you got to the North Carolina line and crossed right in. Now they've closed it because it's a wildlife refuge, and they won't allow you to drive through there anymore. You have to go around the Outer Banks and come back down that way.
Because I used to be stationed in Portsmouth when I was in the Navy.
Yeah.
And we would sometimes go to the Outer Banks, but I had never. This was the late '80s. I'd never remember that you could drive on the.
Well, you couldn't then. They stopped in the '70s, but there's a place called Sandbridge. You might have been familiar with, which is the oceanfront down there, just right up to the Virginia line. And there's all kind. It's big now, but back then there wasn't a whole lot of homes there. just vacation homes. But you could go and the road just ended, and you got on the beach and drove down the beach.
Wow.
Down there.
Yeah, when you said dune bugging, I'm like, where would you dune?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not familiar with where would you go. Okay, that explains that. That's a little before my time. But yeah, because now that's the big thing with all the West Coast kids. Sheldon Creed and Kyle Busch, and well, of course, Robbie Gordon.
They love it out there.
Series. Oh yeah, doing it. I mean, I can't imagine. I'm kind of a clean guy, so to think to bang all the sand out of your shoes or your hair or whatever, but. Wow, that must have been a lot of fun.
I actually worked for Robbie Gordon at one time.
Okay.
For a short period, but I worked around Robbie when I did the truck series. I went out to California and ran Jimmy Smith's team with the Ultra Wheel team.
Oh, wow.
With Mike Bliss. And then Mike Bliss had just come on. Just came in, and he also ran, we ran 2 trucks. We ran Butch Gilliland.
Yes. Yes, you're right. Wow.
David Gilliland's dad. We ran him in the other truck. And actually, Jimmy, he had the off-road trucks is where he came from. Jimmy actually won the Baja 1000.
Right. And didn't he come to Bill France and with the idea?
With the idea of the truck.
Tried to sell it to him, and the France said no, but we can do our own or something?
Yeah. So they worked it out, and at least, and it was pretty cool. I mean, the truck, but he's got his wheel factory, the Ultra Wheel factory, out in California, and what was it, Buena Park, I think is where it was, and which is not far from L.A. and stuff over there, and
nothing's far from L.A. out there, right?
Yeah.
Except everything's in 2 hours of traffic.
We weren't far from Anaheim, right there. We drive through to get to work, but he had the trucks right there, and he also kept his off-road trucks in the same shop, right there in the wheel factory.
Oh boy!
So we would get to see the off-road shocks. So they had, the trucks. They had one room over there just for shocks, and see, shocks is the whole secret on the off-road trucks.
Oh, you watch those? Yeah.
Oh God, yeah. They get close to 3 feet of wheel travel.
Easy.
And we're looking at 3 or 4 inches of wheel travel.
Unless you're coil binding.
Yeah.
They when we ran ARCA race a couple years ago at Mid Ohio, Robbie brought his series in there.
Yeah.
But it was on the pavement, and they put the ramps in, and then you kind of have to adjust it because sometimes as you jump, I'm sure you've been to Mid Ohio. Yeah. You jump and you come off that last turn toward the start finish line where they put the ramp. They were almost hitting the flag stands. So we got to move
I watched
back
that on TV right there. That's wild.
It was a good race, except when
they put on a good show.
Who was it that started fighting? The last corner, Bolamastis and another guy. The last lap started swinging at each other, and it's like, come on, guys. I don't want more. I think I'm trying to remember who won that race, but yeah, I mean, pit road was lined with people watching it.
Yeah.
It was really, and it was only 6-7 trucks, but. It was a really good
They put on a good show.
Yeah, it was a good show. And I did not know that you were in California. You guys almost won that title that year, if I'm not mistaken, with Mike, didn't you? Yeah. Jim never won the title, did he? Or
no. Let's see. I believe he did. It seemed like he did win the championship. I was only there that year, and then I came back home. They brought in Barry Dodson, and they kind of went to the next level because we kind of started it that first year. And we're just doing what we could to get things going and everything. And then he decided he wanted to go, big time and everything. And he hired Barry and built, just bought brand new tractor trailers. And he just did everything. Moved it all back here. Instead of being out of California, they built a shop here and did everything. And Barry really brought it along. He built a good program.
That's what I was
good with those trucks.
I was about to say that. I was about to say that must have been a lot of fun trying to run the whole series from California, but there was a lot of West Coast races, though.
There was
Tucson, and
but being
and
the way that they had it structured then, it was sort of like a glorified short track. You just instead of running at home, running every round, you ran different places around. But we just load us up in a van and travel, sleeping in motels, and you wouldn't be home. You'd be gone for a month. Something like that.
You're like, boy, I'm back to square one like I did in the 70s, huh?
But it was fun.
Right.
It was fun.
Racing was fun. Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's not so much fun sometimes when you're on the floor.
Yeah, we were back. I think we tested at Topeka, Kansas, and then came back to the motel, switched the truck over, and went over to Rougemont or something like that and tested it, and then drove back
Wow.
Drove back to Kansas City, changed the truck back over and raced Kansas City, and then went back and raced there. So we were just living out of suitcases.
You've seen a lot of the country.
Yeah.
Now tell me about Mylock and your dad owning that place, if you wouldn't mind. It was a dog track or something, wasn't it? Am I saying it right? Moyock. I'm sorry. My notes, I spelled it wrong. Sorry.
That was the first I really knew of any of it. I was just a little kid, and my dad owned a fence company. And out back in the yard was one of Bill Champion's old race cars, one of his old Ford Coupes or something like that. And my dad had got interested in it, and they had the old dog track at Moyock that they were changing into a race car track. So my dad had tractors. He had some equipment and stuff, so we'd go down on the weekends, and he'd help them, clear the track and do things, clear all their stuff up. And I remember it was the old wooden bleachers down there and stuff that was covered. And the biggest thing I remember about it is I was down there and got stung by a big old wasp, and they had to stick some tobacco juice, and stick on that thing to take the sting out of it. But they had a big billboard in the infield, and I think my dad got to put the championship, our Champion Fence Company across the logo on the billboard right there. So it wasn't long. My dad, as soon as I announced that I was going to get into racing, my dad said, you'll never mount anything, you'll never make anything at it. The thing he had experienced with my cousin Bill back then was you would pay $50 a tire to go race, and then it paid $50 to win, or $75 to win the whole thing. He said so it's a losing proposition, and he didn't see any future in it. So.
Yeah, I'm going to get somebody else to spend the money.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bobby Gerhardt kind of said the same thing. His dad, raced 4 or 5 nights a week, but then when he, was changing in the early 70s, you weren't able to make as much money anymore, and you were really driving hard and living hard to make a living.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah.
You're spending this much to make this much. And I mean, I've always been of the understanding, okay, purses don't normally always cover your expenses, but I've been a little closer,
Yeah.
I mean, now we're looking at late models, like I'm from Detroit, Flat Rock Speedway, they're $30,000 engines, and you're going, this is
crazy.
a late model.
It's crazy. I don't understand it.
You're not going to even win close to that. You probably wouldn't win that all year if you won every feature. $30,000 for the motor alone. Forget, and the shocks now, like you said, the shock packages now.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm not going to name brands, but I mean, they're insane.
Yeah.
And I mean, but I guess if you want to win and you want to move up, I guess they figure that's what you got to do.
Sponsors pay for it all now.
Yeah.
In drag racing.
If you could find them.
Yeah. In drag racing, everybody's car had a nickname for it, and that was on the side of it. Rat Killer or something, was on the side of these things, and it was never a sponsor. It was just always a name.
Chi-Town Hustler or whatever.
Yeah, they had things like that. And you'd see it'd be Tommy Grove or Shirley Muldowney or, Paula Murphy, something like that, painted on the side of the car.
Paula Murphy.
Yeah.
There's a name I haven't heard in a long time. Wow.
Yeah. And they had all these things on the car, but there was never big sponsor dollars. And then they started bringing in the money because, you couldn't afford it. And once you got that, I mean, there's no way. I remember when Diegard got their first sponsorship with Gatorade, they paid them like $650,000 that year. And everybody's like,
in 76.
Oh my God, that was like big money. Nobody ever heard of that before. I mean, everybody, we got $250, something like that, $300,000, and it was nobody ever heard of that.
But I'm sure even at the time, people were probably going, "Whoa, wait a minute, we're closing in on $1 million. Is this where it's heading?" I mean, once you talk that quote unquote magic 7-digit number, it's like now we're talking big time. I'm sure people were thinking, "Oh my God, what's this sport going to become?" I mean, I'm sure Bill France Sr. was head.
They were thinking about all that, but the guys down there working, you're just glad to get the money, and you're just going,
I want some of that.
Oh, free tennis shoes, T-shirts, and everything. Yeah, wow, we got uniforms.
And working out of Daytona too, that must have been horrible.
Well, they were when I worked for them was in 1980.
Oh,
when
they
I went to
moved
work for them, and they had moved to Charlotte.
I mean, I understand Bill Gardner's thinking, but it's like, well, wait a minute.
Well,
Thru guys,
they didn't know anything about racing when they got into it, and if you don't know, it's like Daytona's World Center of Racing. Yeah, that's where we'll go to. They didn't think about the logistics of traveling and everything.
And a lot of people have their issues with Bill Gardner, but you got to give it to him. He kept. I think his first name was Mike De Prospero. Am I saying his name right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Kept his name in it. They kept him as part of it, even though I believe he just got in a real bad car accident right after their first couple races, I think.
I don't know. I didn't. It was all that was done by the time I got it, because when they were originally started with Dieguards, when they had Donnie Allison, running out of Daytona and stuff, so they were through with all that by the time I got into it.
Gotcha. I thought I'd always heard that Mike had got in a car accident right after they had just started the team, and but Bill kept his name, and then they go out and almost win the '74 Daytona 500. I think Bill had said in interviews, "Boy, this is easy."
Yeah.
And what, 5 laps to go? Donnie blows 3 tires, and maybe it's not so easy. That's racing, but so I did PR for Brad Smith, who was driving for James Hilton. I'm going to pick your brain about that guy, because what a character. James Hilton.
Oh yeah.
Harv was
love James.
Woo, something else.
Love James.
Him and Richard Childress, and
they were two big rivals.
Yeah.
Right then. They were two big rivals right there.
I know we can't tell a lot of the practical jokes they play on each other, but I mean, dear Lord.
Oh, they did.
I remember James telling a story, and I read it in Scene, where he filled up a cup with X-Lax, and he's sipping on it, and he's kind of waving it under Childress's face and trying to get him. He said, because Childress would always swipe his drink and drink it on him, and he said finally Childress took it and drank it. He said, I never saw him stop, but I would imagine. He said, I loaded that thing up. I mean, think about racing today, though. You can't do stuff like that.
Richard took James one time, and James went up in the back of the truck to get something, and Richard came over, shut the door, put the padlock on it, locked him in, and he missed the driver's meeting. Which, you can't do that
Can't
now.
do that
You
now.
miss the driver's meeting, you start at the rear of the field and things like that, but back then, it wasn't that big a deal.
And you talked about you living in trailers, and that trailer, I think, those 2 trailers, I think, were on the property up until the auction, I think.
Yeah.
You and Shelmerdine and everybody else and their brother were living in.
I probably went down there about 6 years ago or something like that, 6, 7 years ago. I went by the shop and talked to James, and trailers were still there.
Yep.
And everything. Matter of fact, there was an old, and I didn't realize it, but James told me, he says, you were probably one of the smartest guys I ever had work for me. He said,
wow, thank you.
He said, you see that jig over there? And it was 2 big, they're probably about, oh God, these huge, almost 2 foot tall I-beams that he had. And I built a jig, because we had to put a snout on a car and check one, and I built a jig and did all that right there. And I had just gotten into racing like the year before that, and came and did that. And he said, you didn't ask me how, you just took off and built it. He said, I've never had anybody do anything like that for me before, or do anything. And he said, it was still sitting there when they had the auction. And the last I saw it was sitting outside. They still had it sitting there.
Wow. Were you there for the auction? I didn't see you.
No, I was busy doing whatever I was, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't go. I'd like to have gone.
I thought I'd heard a quote from Jeff Gordon one time, and I cannot find it, but I could have sworn he said James Hilton is probably the most brilliant mechanical mind of our time. Would that sound like something he might have said? And would you agree with that?
I would agree with it. I mean, I learned a lot from James. I mean, when I wanted to work for Bill, it was like kind of by accident.
Yeah.
And I learned what I could, right there. And then when I worked for James, that's when I really fine-tuned my mechanical abilities and stuff on the race cars, and the durability, things like that. And I mean, and just learn the correct way to do stuff.
Tell me about that, his engine dyno with the propeller.
Well, he didn't have that when I was there.
Okay.
He got that afterwards, but that was originally Bobby Allison's. Bobby Allison built that. Because Bobby was into the airplane stuff with Piper and stuff like that. So Bobby built it. And when he got rid of his stuff, when he kind of went to everybody else, he sold to James. Wow. But it was neat looking. It was down there that day. I stopped by the shop and I looked at it.
It's still there. Oh, wow.
It was them, yeah.
Well, he wasn't still using it though, was he? Or?
I don't know. I don't know if he's still using it or not. But it was neat looking. It was really out of the box thinking.
I worked on an aircraft carrier flight deck, and you watch the propellers turn on some of these planes, and to think that he could watch the propellers turn. I mean, yeah, I'm sure he's listening too.
Yeah.
But to watch and see how the engine's running, it's like, how do you see that? I can't tell the difference. it's one of those mines, I guess, that can.
Well, a regular dyno uses water for a water break to load it and stuff, and all he did was, they still had instrumentation. They just used the props to load the motor instead of water, so you didn't run out of water power, anything, because everybody had trouble at one time. If you weren't in an industrial area that had big water supply, that you would starve for water, you'd have to abort the run on the dyno or something like that.
Yeah.
A lot of them had to put water tanks, put a water tower at the shop or something like that, or a tank somewhere. And
Wow. I'd never noticed because, being from Detroit, I'd stop by the Keselowski shop every now and then. Ron always had his dyno running, but I never noticed, like where they would keep the water. You see tanks, but propane or whatever, gas, but I never thought of the water.
Yeah, they use more water than what your standard water line would hold, would carry. So a lot of them would just build a big, if nothing else, they'd build a big tank in the shop. And it was funny when I went out to California again, running Spears truck team out there. Then he had his was in the mountains of California, right there, Orange County, and he had there's a big water tower up on the mountain right there beside us. And I go, what's that for? He said, oh, that's the water for the dyno, because he was in the Spears company made PVC pipe.
Okay,
and that's what they did. And he's huge, one of the biggest in the country, right there. And so he noticed. He said, yeah, for every so many feet of elevation, you get so much pressure on the thing.
Oh, I didn't think of that.
So that's why I didn't either, and that's why, which it made sense to me, because but I never thought about the water tower like that, and that's why the cities have those big water towers, because it keeps constant pressure for the town right there for all your stuff.
Thanks for tuning in. We had a blast. Next week, Cliff's back for part 2, and he said something interesting. Racing is about competing against the best that you can figure out, and I couldn't agree more. We talk a little bit about those good old days again, his transition into stock cars, and a few more interesting topics that we think you'll enjoy. Tune in next Tuesday at noon, and we'll see you then.